8:48, 8:48 Mountain Time per my clock. So, Ron, you want to go ahead and certify our quorum? Ron, is Ron there? Is he not on yet?
Ron is on.
Okay, I'm sorry. Can you hear me?
Mic muted?
Yes.
Yeah, now we can hear you, Ron.
Okay, I'm sorry. Yes, wanted to officially state we do have a quorum present, I believe. Also that the meeting was properly noticed in advance.
Okay, so in the room we have Eric, Kathy, and Rick. On the phone we have Ron, Scott, and Boyd, and Greg. Greg, are you on?
Yes, sir.
Okay, good. So now we have the quorum. Okay, first of all, I want to, why don't you give me an idea who's in the room there, Eric? Or just how many people we have in the room. You don't have to do a roll call.
We have a total of 9 people in the room.
Okay. All right. First and foremost, y'all, I want to apologize for delaying the meeting slightly. Ken Golden is on vacation this week, and Chris, unbeknownst to me yesterday, was out of pocket. So she called this morning and asked if we could get together real quick, just because she was gone yesterday and I didn't have an opportunity to talk to her. So that was the reason for the delay. I'm going to go ahead and get this rolling. So as everybody is aware, we have been working to get our DCCRs revised this year. Much of the reason for that has been the result of the changes that have happened at Tamarron over the last 3 to 4 years, many of which were documented. Items were documented in the DCCRs that really no longer applied to the property because of those changes. And it has been 10 years since we've done this. I can tell you in my 6 or 7 years on committees or boards here, we have been compiling a bulleted list annually of things that, Chris has tracked and said, okay, I'm going to keep track of this for the next time we revise the DCRs. And that's, really where we are today. So we decided, as we mentioned in the, I believe in the spring board meeting and probably prior, that we were going to start that process. I formed a document review committee, which consisted of John Niebling and Joe Carey, primarily because it sounds like I'm picking on them, but they had the history, and I needed to, really kind of understand, where we had come from dating back to 2009, and then, roll forward individually with these changes. So I'm going to walk through. There should be, we posted FAQs. Are those printed in the room by chance? I don't recall if we're doing that or not. Or we just sharing them on the screen?
The FAQs are printed here in the room.
Okay. So basically what I'm going to do is go through the 4 or 5 areas that we are modifying. I'm going to I'm going to, clarify those as I go. And I may ask for some comments from Joe along the way or other board members along the way as necessary. From there, we'll open it up for board comment, and then open it up for the folks in the room to comment. So, Gary, what do you have showing on the screen? The FAQs?
Yes.
There they are. Now, thank you. They just popped up. Okay. So the first section that we're modifying, that's material. A lot of this, there is some other language in there as it relates to the old DCRs and things like that. Is section 2.1.2. And as everyone is likely aware, 2.1.2 addresses, how we share our common expenses, which ultimately means, how do we calculate our assessments? We, for several years, have been told by our council that our current language does not contain a formula for the calculation of our assessments. Because of that, they've been advising us to make sure we are, wholly in compliance with Kiowa, that we need to include that formula. Historically, we have had what we refer to as an expense binder. That expense binder dates back to 2005, and honestly, the expense binder, while the calculations can be backed into with that expense binder, it's not an openly public, transparent document that the public has access to. So we as owners can access it if we need to. However, if I'm a realtor representing a homeowner, or if I'm a realtor representing, I should say, a prospective homeowner looking to buy property, there is not a way to publicly view the calculation methodology around the assessments at Tameron. So, on advice of counsel and over the last several years, and actually, what we discovered in these discussions is it was suggested we do this in 2009, but we didn't do it then. They've suggested that when we do the revisions that we go ahead and get that formula added. So one of the things that has become, and Kiowa is just this Colorado version of the law, but one of the things that has become commonplace, and I see it on the title side, is homeowner associations, condo associations, et cetera, have to have transparency around their process and their documents and their rules and things like that. That transparency is accomplished through a publicly recorded document, which the DCCRs are. And that makes that document available to the public. Anybody can pull it, anybody can review it, and it gives us that level of transparency. So the change to 2.1.2 basically includes the formula that we have been using since 2006 for our assessment charges. It allows anybody to understand, based on the size of their unit, based on the type of unit they have, how their calculations are done based on our budget. So that is the reason for that change. It's important to note that we are not changing anything as it relates to the amount of the assessments. We're simply providing the formula to document the methodology for the assessments. So, Joe, do you want to add anything to that, or John, while we're on that particular topic?
Sure. You mentioned,
you guys
Scott,
are on the committee.
Yeah, sure, Scott. This is Joe. You mentioned that we tried to implement a change in 2009 with the major DCCRs change that occurred then. And the reason that change wasn't implemented was because the board could not come to an agreement because there was concern that the vote on it by the owners would fail because there were too many owners who would be paying more than what they had been paying historically, while some would be paying less, creating what we like to call winners and losers. And since 2009, there have been 2 to 3 more, John, was it 2 or 3 more attempts? 2 more attempts, John's signaling 2, to effect a plan to make a change that could be documented. And in both of those cases, it failed for the same reasons. And that's where we are today. And like you said, Scott, this is not changing anybody's assessment. Everybody will continue to pay the same this year as they have been. Next year, there's an increase in the budget by a percentage. Owners would see increases in their assessments based on the same methodology that has been occurring for the last 13 years. So no winners and losers. Everybody stays exactly the same. That's why the elegance of this is it reduces that binder, which is about this thick, and I'm showing about an inch between my fingers here, to 1 page, a simple formula that everybody can understand, rather than a binder that most people can't. John, you got anything to say?
No, you said it very well.
Thanks.
Yeah, and I think equally as important, none of us as board members or owners can really explain the binder. This gives us a simple calculation of the transparency that we need. Okay, so I'm going to move on to 11.6. 11.6 is relating to the board's discretion to allocate funds outside of the general funds to assist when we're doing major remodels at in any of the clusters or the lodge. This is really more of a clarification of a practice that we have used when we have done the lodge remodel as well as the the High Point Pinecone and Gamble remodels over the last several years. In essence, what we have done is pulled monies out of general funds to help support and decrease the overall special assessment costs associated with those remodels. Because we had been doing this, we felt that it made some sense to clarify that within the DCRs, and that's the logic behind 11.6. Joe, did I adequately explain that? I know you probably have a little more background on it than I do.
Yeah, what this relates back to is that the board made decisions when we did the major remodel, like exterior remodels in the outside areas, the exteriors to all our buildings over many years, that the board would contribute a certain amount of association's general funds to that, and the number 200,000 kept coming up, and so we repeated that and repeated that and repeated that, and when we got to the lodge, it was realized, it was determined that a greater number than 200,000 should be applied to the lodge. Some people thought that wasn't a good idea, wanted to know why. There was discussion and disagreement about it. But what this basically does is give the board more latitude, more discretion to look at those kinds of projects. And if the board sees that that benefits the association as a whole to have that complex do something, whatever it is, then the board can decide to allocate general funds, an amount of general funds to that project. That's simply what it does. I'm done, Scott. Is he still there?
Sorry, I was gabbing away here without with my mute button on. I apologize. So the next section shouldn't require a lot of discussion. It's mainly tied to the pool and spa. We have language, or have had language, I should say, historically related to the pool and spa and how we handled expenses related to the pool and spa, which no longer exists. So that is simply being removed as a cleanup item to ensure that we're in accordance with the way our property is today. Next section, section 16, relocation of boundaries. So we have had this language since the 2009 revision in the DCRs, and since that point, we have had one request for a relocation of boundaries, and we went to vote on it last year, and that vote was I won't say unanimously, but it was overturned for that one request with more than 67% of the ownership. So we felt it was something that felt we needed to clean up. It's a very complicated process to do any kind of relocation because of the seizure of common elements, and as such, we are making the recommendation, as has legal suggested, that we remove this completely because it really just doesn't apply to our association at this stage anymore. I don't know, Joe, if you want to add anything to that.
Well, just in case anybody doesn't understand what a relocation of boundaries is, it would be somebody asking to expand the size of their unit, reduce the size of their unit, or combine two units, which would include taking over common property, which is now belongs to all of us. So it would be a question about whether the association would allow an owner to take over common property that wasn't his before. And after we wrote this in 2009 and thought it might be a good idea because there were people who said that they wanted to combine units, we found out that the costs were such that nobody was doing it. One person did it last year, and as Scott indicated, the vote to approve that would have required 67% of the owners to vote in the affirmative, which would have been a number in the neighborhood of 250 or so. In fact, only 89 owners saw fit to approve that measure, and out of the 200 or so that voted, 130 voted against it. So it was soundly defeated. It seemed to make sense to us to the board, that this article really has no more practical relevance, and it probably would no request to reallocate boundaries would ever be improved in the future based on this precedent. So let's get rid of it.
Okay. Thanks,
Think-
Joe.
You might just add, Scott, that the board here is not expressing an opinion about owners owning adjoining units. We have a term we call households. We're not opposed to owners combining units that share a common wall. It's just that we can't give you possession of that common wall. Does that make sense to everybody?
That's correct. Yeah. Yeah. There's a lot of owners that have created a pathway between adjoining units, and that's fine.
Okay, thanks for clarifying. All right, and then the last section, I'll handle and clarify for everyone. As I've mentioned in multiple board meetings, dating back probably a year and a half now, I have been working to try to identify how we can obtain Fannie and Freddie approval, or obtain the necessary language to get Fannie and Freddie approval for our association's properties to be included as an approved condominium unit that is eligible for what we call conforming financing, which basically means it fits in the box that Fannie Mae will approve. I've spent my entire career in the mortgage industry and title industry, so I do understand the legalities behind it. And in essence, what we've done is we've made the net modifications, working with Chris, to ensure that mortgagees, or what we would call lien holders, those banks or mortgage companies or investors like Fannie, who have a lien against a property and an interest in our property as a result of that lien, because it's been pledged for a loan, receive proper notification of any catastrophic changes that might affect their security interest. So, if we were to make a change, for example, if we had a portion of, one of our clusters had a fire or a flood or something that we determined we didn't want to repair, for example, we would have an obligation to notify these lien holders, and they would have an opportunity to voice their opinions because they have a security interest in those properties. So working with a law firm here locally in Houston that specializes in reviewing Fannie and Freddie documents on behalf of lenders, we crafted language, and for the record, this language was in our documents prior to 2009. We crafted language that would put us back in conformity with the requirements of Fannie and Freddie for those types of notifications to lien holders. I've already received formal approval from one of the lenders there locally in Durango that had requested that we go through this exercise. The larger benefit is this will allow any lender who wishes to loan on our property to be able to review our DCRs, recognize the inclusion of the language within those DCRs, and include our property in a conforming finance scenario. As everybody is likely aware, I'm sure many of us in the room and many of the owners paid cash or put a significant amount of money down to obtain their units. Refinancing has been largely unavailable to us. I've had at least a dozen people reach out to ask if they can do cash out refis. That has been unavailable to us because of the language in these documents. So what we've done is modified the language to ensure that notification provision is in there, that once recorded, can be made available to any lender looking to make a loan to a homeowner, to a homeowner looking to refinance, to a homeowner looking to take cash out, to a homeowner, a prospective homeowner looking to buy a unit, and allow for conforming financing as opposed to the bank financing that we've had, which is large down payments and typically an adjustable rate loan product. So, really what this opens us up to is a standard, conforming Fannie Freddie 15 or 30-year mortgage, which we have not been able to get at competitive interest rates. So that's really the summary. At this stage, I'm going to open it up to the board to see if there are any questions from the board on any of those issues. Okay. Since I do not have questions from the board, I will turn it over to questions from the owners, but I'd like to ask John or Joe to, is there anything you want to address initially since you worked on the committee with us? I know you covered a lot of it already.
Sure. John Deebling, Unit 806. I guess I would simply encourage the board members to support these changes. The last time these DCCRs were revised was 2009. A lot of things have happened. There's a lot of experience that has gone on the last 10 years that has brought about the desire to make some updates and changes. Also, I think it's important for owners to know that the board does not make these changes. By voting today, the board is merely recommending that owners vote on these changes. So keep in mind, all owners, that this is not a board decision. This is an owner decision. However, boards has a fiduciary duty to do what's in the best interest of all owners, do what's in the best interest of the association. So in making these recommendations, because the board deals with this day to day and owners don't, it's tough for owners to really understand all the complexities. But trust me, the board's very conscientious, and one of its duties, for instance, is to make sure the association's documents comport with Colorado law. And so, for instance, that would be why it would be, if in the assessments there was a formula like that law says there should be, then that is a closer adherence to state law than what we have now. So that's the issue behind that. And then you look at say, for instance, the removal of Section 16, which, as Joe pointed out, that only one owner in 10 years has made the attempt. It failed, and yet it took a lot of board time and energy to, and you got to wonder, is that really something that's that valuable when it's virtually unused and it costs money to do? So I think the board's trying to be fiscally responsible in suggesting the removal of that. And of course, some of the other ones are probably even more obvious than that, like getting rid of the pool clause, because that doesn't exist anymore. So anyway, again, I would just encourage the board to vote in favor so that owners have the chance to vote.
This is Joe. I'll add to something John said on Article 16, the removal of Article 16. He talked about the time that the board spent on that whole process, but there was also cost. We had significant legal costs in that, excess of $10,000, and that was just money that we felt we shouldn't have had to spend on a process that ultimately failed on the owner. So we like to avoid those kinds of problems in the future as well. In general, going back to the package of proposed changes that hopefully you will get to vote on, when we put this out 10 days ago, Gary posted all of the materials on the website and also an email address where you could write in and ask questions. We actually expected a lot more responses than we got. We got 4. 2 of them were from owners who said, I like it, I'll vote for it, let's do it. Interestingly enough, one of those persons, and I won't name him, was one of the group, I'll call them, from 3 or 4 years ago that were the rabble-rousers, made a lot of noise, a lot of dissension. Well, one of them was one of the guys that said, yeah, let's do this. The other 2 were, somebody pointed out a misspelling in the documents. Thank you very much for that. And then one owner pointed out a very good point that in somewhere we're taking out the pool and spa language, and we still had a reference to pool and spa expenses in one of the definitions. So we removed that. So we thank that owner for pointing that out and helping us clean that up. But that's it. So mostly any responses we got were either neutral or positive. So that was good. The only other point I would like to make is, you're going to hear you may hear some more comments after a motion and a second are made and there's discussion. But I believe you have to make decisions for the right reasons. I've been involved with this association for many years. We're the largest homeowners association in Southwest Colorado by a great degree. We have the largest budget, largest number of owners and units, maybe in the whole state. I'm not sure. I've never looked into that, but definitely in the southwest part of the state and in the Plata County. To think that we could have major decisions, and we've had lots of changes, all the exterior remodels, the disagreements that were involved in that, but we got it done. The pool and fitness center, how many iterations of that did we have with Glacier trying to get something done to modernize that aging facility? And now look what we have. And we have membership. We have the golf. We have access to the golf course again. So everything is, nothing comes without a little pain. I mean, you're gonna make an effort to do something. It's gonna take some effort, and there could be some pain involved in cost. But change is inevitable. And if we didn't have changes, sometimes difficult ones here, we'd still be sitting back in the 1970s, and I don't think anybody would like that. So I just make that comment because this is a change. It's not a huge change, I don't think. It cleans some things up. The assessments question can raise questions in people's minds. Why are you doing that? I think we're trying to explain that, but I think it's all good, and it's going to benefit us in the future if we go forward with this. And I think that's all I had to say. Scott, back to you.
Okay, thanks, Joe. So before we take questions from the audience, I think we need to have a motion from the board, and then we can open it up. So Ron, you would like to make a motion?
Yes, I'd like to make a motion that we submit the recommended changes to the DCCRs, to the ownership for a vote to approve the changes.
Do I have a second?
I'll second this, Rick.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Wait. You gotta have discussion, Scott.
Oh, I'm sorry, I got to have a discussion. My bad. I felt like we were just sitting there having a discussion. But I did ask a few minutes ago if there were any questions, and I didn't get any. So any discussion? All righty then. Then I will move to a vote. All in favor? Whoops, we haven't.
Scott, I think you only asked for comments from the board. I think you need to ask for comments from the audience.
Yeah, but don't I have to do the vote first? Or am I screwing that up?
No, it's comments from the board, then comments from the owners.
From the audience, then the vote. Sorry, I'm sorry. Doing this on the phone is a little harder. Okay, discussion from the audience. Thanks for setting me straight, guys.
I think somebody here had a question, I thought.
Yeah, are we going to be recording this?
Yes.
It is being recorded, yes.
Yeah.
Your name, please, and unit number.
Okay. My name is Jim Murdoch. I own Unit 773 in Gamble Oak.
Thank you.
All right. I'm for the transparency too. And I worked on the committee back in 2016, and spent a lot of time on trying to figure out exactly what to do, and had to go to like the La Plata clerk and recorder to get some of the documents, and one of them was the 1996 declarations that consolidated all the different complexes. And so I got hold of that, and then I was also able to ultimately get hold of the way the current assessments are made. But anyhow, I'll just start off here. Can I give Gary some things to pass around?
Sure. Can I ask, can everyone here online, can you hear Jim?
I was able to hear him. Now,
Okay.
I obviously not. I
Because I
can't
can-
see the document.
Thank you, Scott.
I can't move the mic. I can move a mic closer if not. Okay, go ahead.
I can hear him.
Okay,
It's good.
if you look at the paragraph that's third from the bottom, in this email from Bill Polian, it says in 2009, the voters voted 337 to 6 in favor of the current DCRs, and that was the well, it's what we have now. But I just can't imagine the 2009 DCRs tried to make the formula that's being used now permanent, and that, let me pass this around. So it'll probably, I'm not very good at this. So I want to bring your attention to the lodge. It's 106 units and 291 square feet. The governing documents from 1996 say that the assessments are to be made on a per square foot basis. And if the board found something that they felt they could justify that was equitable to all the owners, then they could adjust that. So, but here's what happened with just the lodge. In 2016, the 1996 DCRs on a per square foot basis had the assessment at $356,000. The board of directors had it at $530,000. A difference of $172,000 for just the lodge owners. And to think that that would have passed if there had been transparency, the vote wouldn't have been 237 to 6. It would have been more like, I don't know, just the opposite of that. You know, the 261 units that are less than 750 square feet, and that's the minority. Then on the majority side of it, there are 118 units. But I don't think that when the 2009 amendments were passed, that there was any transparency. If there had been, there would have been a hell of a lot more people than 6 vote against it. So I think that's null and void. And when you talk, all the discussion this morning has been about trying to make it transparent, what's going on. And that's been a problem for a long time. It just keeps coming up and coming up. In the original documents, let me pass that around so you can read that. Oh,
Wrong one.
One myself. So,
I'm
this
sorry,
is that-
just for the record again, what document are we looking at?
This is, I
This
got
is the
this from
1996.
Pardon me?
You said this-
1996 amended. I got it from the county clerk and recorder.
So this is a Taco's DCCRs at that
Yes,
point in time?
yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. And to my knowledge, this has never been made transparent. The others, the 2009 amendment was made public. But when the owners voted to change the 1996 DCCRs, they weren't aware of what they were voting on. So read that paragraph there. I'll read it out loud. It says the assessments must be filed in a uniform rate for all units and shall be allocated to each unit on the basis of allocated interest. And the allocated interest is square footage. Or otherwise equitably determined by the board and shall be sufficient to cover the budget of the association. Notwithstanding the foregoing, the association has the right to make differential and equal assessments for various categories of common expense based upon the different types of units, complexes, buildings, provided assessment breakdowns shall be included in each year's annual submittal. So the 2009 I think, is void because it obviously it wasn't transparent. Only 6 people voted against it. So the thing you need to fall back on would be what was written in 1996. And if you read that, that is exactly like what they do for real estate assessments. And that's what the attorneys thought was right. That's what they wrote. And they even set out the ownership interest for each condo. And close to 100% of the common expenses are to be allocated in this method, and they aren't being. So there's been a complete lack of transparency. There's been an effort to cover it up in 2009. There's an effort to cover it up now, and this has bothered me for 2 years. So,
I have some comments,
Yeah.
but I'll wait my turn if you
Yeah.
want to correct
Well,
it otherwise.
I would, okay, are we ready to take a pause and try and respond to some of that?
Yeah.
Or,
If I could add something, Eric, obviously I wasn't around in 1996. I wasn't around in 2006. I don't believe that there was any intent to hide the process. The board obviously adopted it. We can't go back and undo what happened in 2006 and 2009 or in 1996. What I will say is we have been assessing since 2005, I guess, when the binder was adopted, the same way. And the formula that we have asked to be placed in the DCCRs solves for the transparency issue that the change addresses. So, Joe, there's people in there that have more history than I, so I'll let you chime in.
and Joe may chime in on this as well,
Yeah,
but let me just say
I'll
that
give you more, Joe.
Yeah. what you shared in terms of 1996, I don't think anybody here would dispute that. The only thing I would remind you is that the state of Colorado,
was there.
but the state of Colorado passed a law called Kiowa, which made the 1996 language no longer consistent with the new law. So the board had to do something. The board did something in 2009. So while I appreciate what we said in 1996, and Joe, correct me if you think I'm different, but the law doesn't allow us to do this anymore. So I can't use this as a starting point.
Irregardless, this is what Jim was reading from. It is an excerpt from the 1996 declarations. But the thing that the thing I want to point out is, and I remember this, these deja vu here. I challenged these numbers because I didn't, back then, because I didn't think that I couldn't, this governing document and board of directors columns.
That was
I got the floor. So I challenged those numbers back then. I challenge them now. It's not a true statement. All due respect, Jim, it is not a true statement that our assessments are based purely on square footage.
what was that?
It is not a true statement. I assert that it's not a true statement that our assessments are based purely on square footage. And if you go to the attachments, if you go to the exhibits that are in these 1996 declarations, what you will find is the binder. The binder was part of these 1996 declarations. Jim's shaking his head no, but that's not the case. So our declarations were based originally on a proportion of square footage per unit, market value, what you paid for it, market value. And one of the most important parts of it was rentability, because this place was originally built as we don't like to use the term, but it was a condo hotel, right? People bought it with the full intent of knowing that they were going to rent it most of the time, occupy it very little, no more than 30 days a year. So rentability was an important part. That's why there's in the exhibits that come with these declarations, there's a schedule, and that schedule places a factor on each unit type. S units were given a factor of 1. Everything else was given a factor of 1 point something. And the 1 was designated as an S unit was the hardest unit to rent. The more easy units to rent were the units in the lodge. The units in the lodge were, they had more access to the facilities, they had elevators, they didn't have a spiral stair. So there were many, many, many factors involved in what went into determining the assessments. And as Eric rightly points out, when we went to 2009 and redefined our declarations, the singular major point in that was to come into compliance with Kiowa, the new law that had been enacted in the mid-2000s, 2006. Was it 6?
2006.
6, yes. And then, like today, our attorney vigorously encouraged us to come into compliance with Kiowa. So we did. We tried to come up with, as Kiowa wanted then, we tried to come up with a formula for the assessments, and as I explained earlier, we couldn't get a vote of the board we couldn't get agreement among all board members to change the assessments based on a formula that created just what Jim is looking for, winners and losers. If we reduce the assessments historically for the smaller units, then the bigger units are going to have to pay more. We would never have gotten it passed. It would never, ever, ever have passed. So we said, let's stay with the status quo. Let's put something in there that directs us to a formula, the binder, not a good one, that keeps us where we are and maintains the assessments at what people knew their assessments were going to be when they bought the units, and not create a firestorm of owners who all of a sudden their assessments go up 5, 10, 20%. Some of them were larger than that. And that's the same thing that happened in the subsequent committees that were put together. Jim was a member of the most recent one that resulted in the presentations that Jerry Q2 made a couple of years ago. And of course, that all fell to the side because it was really recognized that it would never pass a vote of the owners. Understand, this vote here, because we're not changing anyone's assessments, only requires a 51% by you owners. If we change the assessments the way Jim would like to see them, it would require 67% because then we're changing the numbers for everybody. Opinion here, that will never pass. It'll never change.
I wish I could respond to each one of those instead of listening to all of that at once.
Okay, and we can come back, Jim, but I would like to give somebody else in the room a chance to speak, and we have people online. Anybody else in the room that would like to make a comment for or against on the motion on the table? Scott, I see none, so I think Gary has some written comments. I don't know if anybody online wishes to speak, but Gary, can you share the written comments?
Sure.
Just the short ones.
Okay, Ron Hyman has written, I must presume that since this issue DCCR is critical to TACO, that input and questions will be accepted from GoToMeeting. It would appear that the annual unit assessment ranges from 0.2046% per unit to a high of 0.4490% per unit. Can the board provide the rationale used in calculating this wide range of TACO assessment? And second question, again from Ron Hyman. If we've embraced Kiowa, are we not obligated to incorporate all applicable Kiowa language into our class of condominium, HOA? I am specifically referring to the board's, I assume that he's writing decision to remove the DCCR section on consolidation. Those are the only two questions.
Let me respond to Ron's first question. He's reading from the Exhibit B that was supplied with the DCCR's changes and would become the exhibit that explains what's going on. It's B, which would be referenced in Article 2.1.2, Exhibit B. And he's referencing the percentages that each unit type pays. There's a relationship between the unit type percentage and the number of units. That's why the units that are where there's only one, for instance, it's an
MS.
The MS unit pays only 0.4%. Well, he's only one unit, so he doesn't have a divisor to break that down like the A units do, because the A units pay 11.3%, but there's 46 of them, so it divides everybody's numbers down. That's the answer to that question. Why is the percentage range so disparate? Because of the number of units. The calculation takes into account the number of units in a unit type, its percentage, divided by the number of units. I didn't catch.
The other was consolidation, Joe, and honestly, I'm not familiar enough to address it on the fly.
What's that?
He raised a question about removing consolidation language. That's something the board hasn't considered. Scott, unless you have I'm not knowledgeable enough about the question to suggest the board deal with it in this meeting.
I didn't catch the whole question. I was thinking about
He wanted to remove the language on consolidation. Did I say that right?
I thought we are.
We are removing it. I think if I understood his comment, Gary, it was something along the lines of in compliance with other recommendations from Kiowa. Why don't you read it again just to make sure we all on the same page?
Sure. Second question. If we've embraced Kiowa, are we not obligated to incorporate all applicable Kiowa language into our class of condominium? I am specifically referring to the board's decision to remove the DCCR section on consolidation.
I don't think we're in a position to address that on this call because it's not something that I'm familiar with from a Kiowa perspective. What I will tell you, from my perspective, is, and I think it's the perspective of the vast majority of the ownership as well as the board, because we just went through this. We've had one request for consolidation. I don't need to point out who it was because you just asked the question. That consolidation was because of the taking of common elements, was required to go to a vote of ownership. It was overturned by a large majority. If we were to retain that language, anytime anybody asked, we would have to go through this vote process because taking of common elements requires a vote. It is our belief as the board and our belief from our council that given the precedent set by the election, when that request came in from that vote, I shouldn't use the word election, I meant vote, that it makes sense to remove the language so we don't have to deal with that going forward and don't have to deal with going through the cost and expense and time spent by your volunteer board and membership to go through consolidation requests that are just going to be shot down. So that's what I have to say. I don't know if anybody has any other comments.
I see none from the board. I'll take another question. Name, please, and unit number.
Terry Mott, 849. I'm just wondering on this consolidation, you said that and I'm aware that there are a number of adjacent units that have opened up between the units. So now we're saying that that's not going to happen anymore?
No, that was
Common area between the units?
the common area we call a household. When you merge two units and you either have a pass through or not, most people obviously do. That has not changed at all. What this particular request dealt with was retitling, going down to the title company and saying, I own a bigger footprint than I used to. The problem with owning that bigger footprint is in the middle of that footprint was common elements that were owned by you and everybody else who owns property here. The board felt we could not speak for you. That's why we had a vote. We asked the owners to tell us whether they were willing to give up their rights to that common element. As Scott has said, it failed. It needed a 2/3 majority, and it fell way short of that.
So does that mean that if somebody wants to do that in the future after this is passed, that they will be unable to do it?
I think that's, yes. There is well, what they would have.
The question is an owner, somebody in the lodge owns Unit A, and they buy Unit B next door. There's either there's a connecting door or there's not. They can use the connecting door and they go back and forth between those units, and they can treat those units as a house. It's their place. They don't, so they've got it. If there's no connecting door, they could put one in.
So in the outlying Campbell Oaks and Pine Council, where there is no existing connecting door, it's still possible to.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Well, you are a good example because you bought a unit that used to be
To make sure that there was.
that used to have a connecting door with the unit next door to it because you I don't want to use the word consolidate. You uncombined those two units when you bought 849.
Well, it was already done.
Yeah.
Because the seller had to do that in order to put it on the market individually. Right.
Thank you.
Yeah, what they did was break up the house.
We have no issue with that.
Yeah.
Because for the main reason is that it doesn't legally change the titling of either the units or the common elements. Common elements stay common elements, the units stay units. Unit owner can buy this unit and this unit together next door, and he can operate them as one house.
Gus von Goldschwing, 788, 789, 512, and 513. Just to clarify this, the way I understand what we've just said here, for example, in my 512 and 513 unit, I can take that whole wall out, but legally I can't separate these, make it into one unit.
That's correct.
That is something more or less.
That's pretty much correct.
Yes.
Now, you would have to get approval from
Of course.
Taco to do that, because you'd have to look at, is that a load-bearing wall? And all, yeah, structural, yeah, right.
And just as Terry did, at the end of your term, when you decide to sell,
It's 2
if Taco
units.
said you have to put it back, then you would have to put the wall back. If that was part of your original architectural review agreement. You would know that before you tore the wall down.
It's good to remember.
If you decide to sell the unit separately. I mean, if you sell it as one unit, then there's no
Okay,
problem.
then you can keep.
But as Joe was pointing out, there was a homeowner who owned multiple properties, decided to break up the household into 2 units, 2 households. They had to put the wall back.
Got to put it back.
So if I then sell it, I have to sell them as 2 units or
Yeah,
put the
you-
wall back in.
Right,
Yes.
yes. She had a question.
Me and both 7-Eleven. So that, my question was similar to his. So you can knock the whole wall down once you get approval. You don't have to just have like a doorway put between 2 units. You can take the wall down, but then if you want to sell it, you have to put the wall back up, is what you're saying.
If you wanted to sell them individually.
Individual, oh, but you could sell it as one big unit. You just can't title it as one big unit. with
That's right,
no
you'd still be
square
selling
footage,
2
it's
units, you'd still be selling 2 units together
Okay.
simultaneously.
So is the common area then the wall, or is the common
It's the,
area
it's the space.
the space that the wall takes up?
2 inches, 4 inches.
Yeah,
Really?
inches,
That's it. That's all it is.
it's still, it's, common area is common area. You can't say this isn't a common area because it's just a little bit,
Uh-huh.
you know. This whole room is a common area, right?
Anything else from online?
Don't believe so.
Okay. Terry?
On another topic, I was a little confused in the discussion regarding the assessments on different units. And the factor that was mentioned, rentability.
Rentability?
Is that still a factor?
Well, not in our minds,
I'm sorry?
not in our minds. It was in the founding fathers' minds, if I can use that term, but it really isn't for us. I mean,
Well, there was a mandatory rental pool back then, was there not?
it was basically a mandatory rental pool, and so
So that
rentability
doesn't
was a big
affect-
question. Now, today,
Rentability doesn't affect it. We have a mortgage, and we were required not to rent. And we never wanted to rent. But I just wondered if the assessment had some built-in factor regarding rentability that wouldn't apply to it,
originally it did.
but not that, or with this new.
Well, cards on the table. We're not changing anything. So if there was that factor in there before, probably still is.
And that should be spelled out in.
No. We're reducing all of that to a simple formula and not changing anyone's assessment. And the logic behind that is everybody in this room bought their units with the presumption that the assessments were going to be what they are today and proportionately the same going into the future, right? If we change that, if we decide to change it to another formula that means that X type unit is paying a little more than they used to proportionally and Y type unit is paying a little less, then that's going to require, that might take out all the factors that were in there historically, right, presumptively. But it also changes everyone's assessments to the extent that it would require a greater percentage of owners to vote in favor of it to get it to pass.
So that it'd be more difficult to pass, but the original formula for determining the HOA assessment on each unit, it remains what it was.
The effect of those remains. The formulas don't remain. The effect of those remains.
Can I just ask, is that formula written or is there anywhere we can see it?
Which one, the old one or the new one?
The new one?
The new one's in Exhibit B. It's right there. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you very much.
Okay, I'm just going to mention we had from Jim a handout relative to 1996. I really don't think we should spend time on this, Jim. 1996, the law's changed. I appreciate that, and we can't undo Kiowa. So I see no other questions in the room, Scott.
Okay. So with no other questions in the room, I will, again, we have a motion on the table from Ron, and I apologize I went early before with the vote, but we have a second. I'd like to go ahead and move forward with the vote. All in favor?
Scott? Scott?
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Somebody help me out.
Scott, I'm sorry. I did have one more comment. There's
Okay, fire away.
I was all ready for this, and I got lost in the discussion and forgot about it. There will waiting for that background noise to stop, whatever it is.
Yeah, I can't hear you worth a damn, so please do.
Okay, well, there was some background noise somewhere from somebody, but it's gone now.
Okay, now I got you.
So, Schedule B, as written, everybody has that. It occurred to me, like yesterday, that the HOA took possession of Unit 110. So that means there are no longer 103 voting and assessing units in the lodge, in IU type units in the lodge. There's now 102. That changes the calculation, which changes the percentages almost imperceptibly. And I have them sitting here. I don't have them printed on my computer. And as you would expect, that reduces the bulk or the by unit type assessment percentage for lodge units from 24.8567 to 24.675. So that's the kind of effect we're looking at. And then, of course, there's some incremental, insignificant increases in some others, because this is all in a spreadsheet. When I develop these percentages, it's all in a spreadsheet that results in a tool that we'll be able to use in the future, whereby you just insert the total amount of the assessable budget. Yeah, the budget that's accessible to owners. We have other revenue streams, so the amount that would become the total amount of the owner's assessments, you plug in that figure, and it spills out the by unit type assessments on a monthly basis, and it works real well. I was surprised how easily it came out. But anyway, so when this goes to the vote of the owners, Exhibit B is going to have a very, very slight change in it in the percentages. And by example, IU units went from 24.8567 to 24.675. So a few hundredths of a percentage point. I don't know if you want to make that a part of the motion, that it'll incorporate that change, but you probably should.
Yeah. Why don't we go ahead and make it part of the motion? And I just to be clear on that, I mean, this is going to happen on a very rare occasion. Obviously, the association acquiring that unit changed the dynamic. That will be reassessed annually, Joe?
These figures will stay. The only thing that could change them in the future could be if the HOA acquired any more units.
Correct. That's what I mean.
I frankly don't see that happening, but I mean, Unit 110 was a very special case, as everybody knows.
Right.
So
well, you'd reverse the math if we sold it.
If we sold it, you'd reverse the math. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. Okay. So, Ron, you want to revise your motion, please?
All right, you want to specify what we're adding and taking away now?
basically, you're going to make your same motion, but also add that we are including in that the adjustment to the calculation formula necessary to recognize the acquisition of Unit 110 by the association.
Okay.
Yeah. Good way of putting it. Yep. And of course, the revised exhibit will be the exhibit that the owners see online and what they'll be voting on. So they'll be able to look at the numbers. Again, they're very, very small changes.
All right. Do you need me to repeat that then again, the motion?
So the motion will be that, I mean, basically you're making a motion that we move forward with submitting the suggested changes of the DCCRs to a vote of the association,
right.
Including the change necessary to represent the formula adjustment that has occurred after the acquisition of Unit 110 by the association.
Okay, I got it.
And Ron, this is Rick. I will still second.
Okay, got it.
All right. I'm going to move to a vote. All in favor of the new motion as submitted by Ron and the board? Aye.
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 All right. Is that 7-0? Greg, did you chime in?
Aye. Yes, sir.
Okay.
7-0.
7-0. Okay. All right. Well, guys, I appreciate everyone's time on this. Just for everyone's background, as we are all aware, we have a board meeting coming up September the 6th, I think. Is that correct, Joe?
It's the Friday, first Friday in September. I believe that's the 6th. Yeah.
Yeah. So, in essence, we will have ballots crafted that include not only the candidates for the board. We will also be including a ballot to approve these changes, to have the owners approve the changes to the DCRs as well. And that will go out, I believe August 6th was the date we were going to have that go out, so it'll go out likely next week. And then we will, tally those up in preparation for our annual meeting in September. So,
Hey, Scott.
Yeah.
This is Eric. My apologies. I thought Jim was done. I asked when I made my comment and he didn't respond. I thought he was finished. I know we voted, but he says he wants to make a short comment.
No.
That's fine.
Yeah, okay. So when you present this to the board, are you going to give them any history on the how you came up with the fees? Any documentation?
Honestly,
You got to show the owners how they arrived at the numbers. And this method, I can pass it around. The binder is just ridiculous. People just sitting around talking and coming up with numbers. Joe says he doesn't know how it works.
Well, it was developed in 1974. That binder goes back to 1974.
Well, we're talking about 1996. You were under this. You were the treasurer and probably on the board.
Not in 96. I wasn't on the board in 96.
Okay, well,
I wasn't even. I was a fly on the wall in 96. Yeah.
I
guess,
think I can answer that question. Jim, I'm going to answer that as president of the association. We are not going to go back and rehash history from 1974 to 1996. What we have done is we have gone back after Kiowa was passed. We made the necessary changes to our documents to support Kiowa at the time. We have been advised by council that we needed to include the formula that we have been using as, for the last 15, 16 years, whatever the number is, for our assessments. Our council has approved the changes that we're making. We are going to submit those to the ownership and allow the ownership to vote with the understanding that we are documenting and providing transparency around the formula that represents how we have been assessing units dating back to 2005, I think Joe said. And that will go to a vote and will require 51% approval of the ownership. We have gone through this exercise of trying to come up with different formulas multiple times. We haven't been successful. I think we've been very clear that we don't think it will pass, that making those changes will get us the necessary 67% votes to do so. But at this stage, we are taking this to a vote based on the formula that is contained in that exhibit. And I don't think there's any realistic expectation or any realistic reason to provide history going back to 1974, because this property has been 2 hotels, it's had mandatory rental units, it's had various calculations relative to occupancy and size and cash flow associated with rentals. None of that applies. We are a radically different property than we were in 1974, than we were in 1996, quite frankly, than we were in 2009. We have changed the building. We have gotten rid of portions of the building. We have different amenities. We have access to golf. We have things that this place has just changed radically. So I don't know that it does anybody any good to go back in time and include some rationale that nobody here can explain, because we weren't involved and we were a different property.
So you're going to continue the cover-up?
Jim, I don't agree with your assessment. I don't appreciate it. You can call it a cover-up. We've given you, we're providing transparency as to the formula. It's not a cover-up. If anything else, it's quite the opposite.
I'm insulted by that remark, because
I take offense to it as well.
Yeah.
I think you're one of the reasons for where we are.
Yeah. I'll tell you.
Jim, you are welcome to your opinion, and that's what that really comes down to. So if that's the way you're going to approach this, I'm going to make a motion that we adjourn this meeting.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 So is it okay if I mail my information out to the owner?
Absolutely.
You're welcome to do whatever you like. Here's your stuff back.
All right. Gentlemen, audience, everybody in the room, ladies, I appreciate everybody's time today. And hope everybody enjoys a glorious weekend in the mountains while we swelter down here. Thanks, everyone.
Take care, Scott.
All right. See you guys.
Thanks, Scott.
Take care.